Welcome to the Influential Personal Brand Podcast. This is the place where we help mission-driven messengers just like you learn how to build and monetize your personal brand. My name is Rory Vaden, and I'm the co-founder of Brand Builders Group, a Hall of Fame speaker, and New York Times bestselling author. And this show is to help experts learn how to become more wealthy and well-known. I know you're going to love it. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Well, I'm honored to introduce you to one of the people who is my favorite friends and one of the smartest people I think on the planet, and truly has become one of the biggest personal brands in the entire world. And Jim Kwik is someone that I just got to meet maybe just over a year ago, actually a couple years ago. We met at my Let's book launch. We became friends. He became a client of Brand Builders Group. And every time I meet this man, I'm just blown away by his brilliance, his network, his commitment to service, the depth of his expertise. You may not know this, but he is a brain coach that's been has worked with people like Will Smith, Hugh Jackman, Jim Carrey, Alex Rodriguez, The Rock. I mean, like major celebrities. And he's well known for his speed reading and memory techniques, as well as just helping people optimize their brain overall. He's got millions of online followers. He's trained many CEOs, obviously celebrities. He's spoken for world-renowned organizations like Virgin and Fox Studios, Nike, Zappos, Harvard. And he's been on the Today Show and all over national media. And then, he wrote this book, Limitless, which sold several hundred thousands of copies, became a New York Times bestseller. We got a chance to work with Jim on the expanded edition of Limitless, which just came out. And you can learn more about him at jimkwik.com. Anyways, Jim, thanks for making time for us, man. What an honor to have you.
Rory, I really appreciate not only what you do, but the manner you do it. So thanks for your friendship. Thanks for your support and helping us with our brand. Yeah, we're on a mission to build better, brighter brains. No brain left behind.
Yeah, man. I love that. I For the people that don't know you, can you just tell us the story of, it's in the book and you talk about it, but like why you started working on sort of brain optimization in the first place from your personal childhood?
Yeah, I mean, I know your listeners are interested in this because entrepreneurs, your number one wealth building asset you have is your mind, right? I mean, and the faster you can learn, the faster you can earn. Today, knowledge is not only power, knowledge is profit. And so the more you know, the better decisions that you can make, the more you could expand your business, your bank account, your brand, the effect that you have in the world. One of the ways I share my message is on stages. We're in front of about 250 to 300,000 people every single year as a public speaker. This is my 32nd year of speaking as a brain coach. I usually do, if there's time, these demonstrations. I know you and I have shared the stage numerous times. For me, if I have time, I'll pass around a microphone in an audience and maybe 50 or 60 or maybe even 100 people will introduce themselves and I'll memorize all their names, or the audience would challenge me to
Amazing.
memorize 100 numbers or
Mind-blowing.
100 words. Yeah, and I'll do it forwards and backwards. But I always tell people, I don't do this to impress you. I really do this to express to you what's possible, because the truth is every single one of you listening, you could do that too,
Mm.
regardless of your age, your background, your career, education level, financial situation, gender, history, IQ. We just weren't taught. School is a great place to learn what to learn, like math and history, science, Spanish, but there's zero classes on how to learn. And I think if there's one skill your listeners, like, if there's like one idea to take away from this, your ability to learn rapidly and translate that learning into action is the ultimate competitive advantage today in the 21st century, right? And I know it's possible for all of us because it's such an advantage, but I didn't grow up with that advantage. When I was 5 years old, I had a traumatic brain injury. I had a very bad accident in school. Went headfirst into a radiator. I was rushed to the hospital, lost all this blood, passed out. I mean, but really where I showed up was in school. I had learning disabilities after that. I was put in special education. Um, I had poor focus, poor memory. I had migraines every single day when I was five and
Man.
six, seven. I just thought it was like normal. It took me 3 years longer just to learn how to read. Um, when that was very frustrating, it really laid into my self-esteem, my self-worth, a lot of self-doubt because I wasn't like all the other kids. I would work hard because I came from immigrant parents, but it's, that installed that discipline, but I just didn't do well. And I just felt like it was kind of unfair. When I was 9 years old, I was being bullied and teased for slowing down the class because I just didn't understand lessons. The teachers would have to repeat themselves over and over again, and I would learn to pretend, but I didn't really understand. And teacher came to my defense when I was being teased, pointed to me in the whole class, and said, "Leave that kid alone. That's the boy with the broken brain."
Oh
And
man.
I could tell you, Rory, that that label became my limit. I didn't understand it at the time. Adults have to be very careful of their external words because they often become a child's internal words. So every single word would play out. Every single time I did badly in school, which was all the time, I would always say, "Oh, because I have the broken brain," or to my parents, "I didn't do well on this quiz because I had the broken brain," or "I wasn't picked for sports because I have the broken brain." And we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of learned helplessness and how our self-talk. I believe our brain is this incredible supercomputer, and our self-talk is the program it will run. So if you tell yourself something like, I don't know, maybe your listeners say to yourself, "I'm not good at remembering names," right? Something pretty common. You won't remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to, right? Your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk. And so I struggled. And then eventually I found a mentor at age 18. So I struggled those 13 plus years. Got introduced to the power of the mind, the power of the brain. I started leaning into, starting getting curious, like, how does my brain work so I can work my brain, right? How does my memory work so I can work my memory better? How does I got curious about how to make it practical every day. If they say your brain is this incredible gift and superpower, why wasn't I able to, why do we forget the keys, right? Why do we forget what we just read? How come we're overloaded and we can't keep up with all the information? So, and after I learned these things, I started to teach. And my one of my very first students, I started to tutor. She was a college freshman. She read 30 books in 30 days, not
Wow.
skim or scan. And I know you're a book lover and reader,
I am.
but can you imagine that advantage? And I wanted to find out not how. I taught her how to speed read, but I wanted and to understand even more than she would. Um, I wanted to find out not how, but why. I'm always interested, like you, why do people do what they do, right? So many people know what to do, but they don't do it because common sense is not common practice. And I found out that her mother was just recently diagnosed with terminal cancer, and doctors gave her mom only 60 days to live. And
Wow.
the books she was reading were books to save her mom's life. And with that lever, it's just I wish her prayers. Um, 6 months goes by, I don't hear from her. And I get a call one morning, and it's this young lady, and she's crying profusely. But when she stops, I find out they're tears of joy that her mother not only got, survived, but is really getting better. Doctors don't know how or why. They were calling it a miracle. But her mother attributed 100% to the great advice she got from her daughter, who learned it from all these books.
Wow.
And in that moment, I realized that if knowledge is power, then learning is our superpower. And it's a superpower we all have. It's just, if people are struggling with their focus or their memory or their overload or distractions, whatever, it's not really your fault. We just weren't taught how to be able to use your brain doesn't come with an owner's manual, and it's not user friendly. So that's why I wrote Limitless, to be an owner's manual for your brain, your most valuable asset that controls everything, to be able to read faster, focus better, improve your memory, remember client information, product information, give speeches without notes, do all these things. But yeah, I just feel like we want to fill in the gaps in the education system, for both education and professional, personal development. And I feel like it's a gift that everybody could give themselves. And
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. It is an owner's manual. Like it is an instruction guide, and there's mindset, there's motivation, there's daily practices. Like it's such a powerful book. And you mentioned that um your that label became your limit, right? Early on. What do you think are some of the most common destructive labels that people have? I mean, like you mentioned their names, right? Like I'm bad with names, but like
Mm.
when it comes to, let's talk about personal brand specifically, right? So like
Yeah.
you had to overcome this learning deficit, this sort of these mental challenges with like your development, and you then became one of the world's leading experts, and then you went kind of from being like you're pretty like a lot of people don't maybe don't know this, but like you're a pretty introverted
Yeah.
guy, And
Dude,
yet
very, very.
you are become one of the biggest personal brands in the world. You're reaching maybe a few 100,000 people a year in your speeches, but millions through your videos and your podcast and social media, etc. Like, what were some of the labels you had to
Yeah.
overcome, or that you think personal brands often have to overcome to be able to get their message out to more people?
So for me, I believe it's the person in the mirror. It certainly was in my case. My two biggest challenges growing up were learning, and because of it, public speaking.
Mm.
I remember I was failing high school English, and they called my parents in, and I was so ashamed. Um, I wasn't going to pass the class, and the teacher, talked to my parents, talked to me, and felt a little empathy and said, "I'm going to give you one last chance. You could do this book report on Albert Einstein of all people, and to get extra credit to be able to pass, class." And I said I'm going to do it. I told my parents, I told the teacher, I made promise to them and myself. I spent this was back when people spent time in the libraries. This I was dating, pre-internet, and I did this book report after weeks, and I was so proud of it. And the day it was due, when I go down, my parents, I found it was waiting for me with a little note from my parents. They professionally bound it, and I was just so proud of it. It's hard to describe, but I've never felt pride around anything I did before. But I felt like this is, it just symbolized something, right? And the day it was due, I can't wait to hand it in. I'm sitting in class, and then towards the end of the class, the teacher says, "All right, we have a surprise for all of you kids. Jim, come to the front of the class and present your book report."
Oh
And
no.
I froze because at this time, I never gave a speech before. I was my superpower. I talk about superpowers a lot. I was really being invisible. As you mentioned,
Wow.
I'm very introverted, but back then I was extremely shy and awkward because I never knew the answer. So I would always shrink down because I didn't want to be called on because I just never could know. I didn't know anything.
Wow.
And I would sit behind the tall kid, and even my posture was like slumped up to take up less space. I didn't want to be seen or heard, or maybe I did, but I didn't, want to. So out of fear. So I think fear is a big obstacle for a lot of us. It's interesting that my two biggest challenges growing up were learning and public speaking, because God has a
Well, you
sense
do
of
it for
humor.
you do it for a living, those two
Yes,
things.
all I do is public speak on this thing called learning. But it's just a reminder to everybody that your struggles lead to strengths, right? Our challenges lead to change, and adversity can be an advantage. Like, I believe that sometimes there's some things we can only learn in a storm, right? And some storms come to be able to clear our path, and we don't know until hindsight, looking back years from now, why things happened the way they did. But I do believe I was guided and, grateful for what I went through. But I bring this up because the things that kept me from growing, even the impact was, self-doubt. People struggle with things like imposter syndrome. Who am I at 20 years old to be able to go into companies as I did and teach people three times my age, right? Like, and it was interesting. So I would say the person in the mirror was my biggest obstacle. The doubts, the fears, not being good enough, fear of failure, a lot of trauma that I had to kind of unravel growing up. And even with the book, people assume when the book came out in 2020 that I had like lots of books, but this was my first book.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because I want to help people, and this goes back to a bunch of conversations you and I have had on branding. I want to help people, but I don't necessarily need to be known for it. It's really weird. Like, I want to feel like my life has purpose and I could have an impact, but I don't need as much to be acknowledged for it. I feel like if I had that drive, I would maybe even help more people. But because of it, over 30 years, every opportunity to really scale, I always said no. Media, book deals, train the trainer. I met with Kaplan, the franchise, like to open up quick learning centers, different places, infomercials and PBS specials. All those offers came, and I always said no. And then one day I was in a car accident, and I almost died, and I definitely could have. And the next day, that week, I signed the book deal that was in my inbox for like 10 years
Wow.
because it just made me think about legacy. And, just to everybody listening, I don't know who I'm talking to, but creating the life you want, the contribution, the character, all whatever is important to you, it can be scary. But you know what's a lot scarier is regret. You know, I spent a lot of time in senior centers. I lost my parents, I mentioned, they immigrated here, had many jobs. We lived in the back of a laundromat that my mom worked at, didn't speak the language or anything. My grandmother took care of me because my parents were always working. And when I was going through my challenges at 5 years old, she started showing early signs of dementia, and she eventually passed of Alzheimer's when I was 7. So all those things like really informs where you go. Like my inspiration really was my desperation to feel good enough to feel like, oh, is my brain going to work when I'm older and, with my accident. So, it's the idea where people listening, where you make a decision, where you take your mess and you turn it into your message. And I totally agree with you that we are best suited to support and help the person we once, were. And so like I want to help that 9-year-old boy that had so much doubt and was being teased and ridiculed and feeling like they weren't enough. And I think we can improve our confidence, our self-esteem overnight if we just understand our brains, like because it's so fantastic. And we've dedicated our life to getting this out there on stages, and we have one of the top where we'll cross 100 million downloads on our podcast this year.
Wow, I
Um,
didn't realize that it was
uh,
that's awesome, man. That's
Yeah, and the book, thanks to, yourself, your team, and the other supporters, like, we've done over 1 million copies just, on Limitless, on audiobooks and Kindle and print, 40 different languages. We're just very, very, very proud. We donated all the proceeds to charity. We built schools in Ghana, Guatemala, and Kenya. Also supported Alzheimer's research for women. Women are twice as likely to experience Alzheimer's than men. So in
oh
memory of
wow.
my grandmother. But it's nice, I feel like, we're just getting started. And our goal is to be able to support people, having the brain they desire and deserve.
Yeah, and I think, that concept of that's probably one of the reasons why I was drawn to you right from the first time I met you. We were backstage originally at that
Yeah.
Ed Milet event, and there were so many like major VIP important people, both speaking and just like in general in that
Yeah.
vicinity.
That was a who's who. I
That
remember
was.
Jenna and Mel and
Uh-huh.
everybody.
But
Yeah.
you were so humble, and it was like what you just said, I think, is what spoke to me. Was like, I've never ever caught a sense of ego from you, or an ounce of like posturing or positioning or who I know. I mean, before we started this interview, I had to even ask your permission to share. Like, are you okay if I tell people that like you work with Hugh Jackman and The Rock and Will Smith? Because I know you're like, you don't share those things very often. And I've gotten to know that. And I'm just like, I mean, this is amazing, Jim. Like it's incredible the people that you're working with. And yet it's the heart of going, it's your heart of service, which has been really powerful to see and to go, look at all the good you're doing from scaling. Like, look, all the money you're doing for charity and all of the people you're reaching. And I love that, because to me, that's what, we define our audience as mission driven messengers.
Mm.
And it's not that we don't care about money. We do care about money, but money is subservient to the mission. And I've always felt that way about you, and I can't say that about everybody else in this space. But I do feel that way about you, and I and I love that you've got one book, like you put every so much into this one book. Not everything, but like so
Right.
much into this. You could have written 15 books, but
Yeah.
like this is one of the things that we tell our clients about books is a book should be a conclusion, not a hypothesis. And a lot of authors write books that are hypotheses. They have like, oh, an idea, and then they put it out there. This this is a series of conclusions of a lifetime of work and study, and it's like it's banked. Dr. Mark Hyman wrote the forward for this, y'all. Like the doctors, some of the leading doctors in the world, come on Jim's podcast and everything. And anyways, I love what you do, and most of all, like the way that you do it. Um, I got one other question for you before you go,
Yeah.
but where do you before that, where should people go, Jim, if they want to, connect up with you? Obviously, they can get Limitless expanded. Where else
Yeah.
would you send them?
The book is at limitlessbook.com. You get it where support your local bookstores, I would say social media, take a screenshot of this conversation wherever you're consuming it and tag Rory, tag myself, say hi. I'll repost some of, some randomly and gift out a few copies of Limitless to your community as a thank you for having me on your show. Um, we we're not hard to find. Just search my name in your podcast app. We just crossed 1.5 million subscribers on YouTube, so we put regular content there and help how to read faster, improve your memory, best brain foods, changing your habits, unlocking limitless motivation, and so much more. Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing. And if you just think about like the 100 million podcast downloads and the millions of subscribers, all the people you've helped that never buy a book or never buy one of your courses or programs, like
yeah.
what a gift.
Nine, 95% of what we put out there is completely free. We just, again, we want to positively impact well, at least 1 billion brains. It's pretty bold and audacious. That's why we appreciate you and your community and just helping us show people, build a better, brighter world. I believe you change your brain, you change your life, you change your brain, you could change the world. And yeah, I'm very optimistic of what the years are for everybody here that's listening, in terms of their own potential and own performance.
Yeah. So last little thing, um, if somebody is sitting in that moment right now, Jim, they're listening to this and they have a label that's a limit, right? They had somebody say something to them or
Yeah.
they said something to themselves and maybe they do have a vision to go, I want to impact millions of people. I want to create videos, I want to create content, but they're struggling in that moment. Like what encouragement, what last little bit of encouragement would you give to that person?
I'll if it's okay, I don't really share this, but how I got started on my career, maybe people get a couple of little nuggets that they can
Yeah.
relate to. When I When I got accepted into a local university, I thought freshman meant I could make a fresh start. And I wanted to show the world that I could do it and make my parents proud. I'm the oldest of three siblings, and I wanted to be a good example, right? And I took all these classes freshman year, and I did worse because it's so much more difficult. And I was ready to quit. And I don't know if someone's at that place right now that they've tried a few things and they're just kind of ready to quit. But but hear me out. Like I told a friend of mine that I didn't know how to tell my parents because I didn't have the money to be in school in the first place, so I didn't want to waste it, right? And my friend said, "Hey, why don't you come with me to visit my family? I'm going this weekend and get a different perspective." And that word perspective really changes things for me. I think that if anyone feels stuck, like they're not making progress in some area of their life, maybe their brand, their business, their followers, their impact, their income, whatever, it helps to change your point of view, right? And how you do that, you change your place or you change the people you're spending time with. And I end up going the weekend visiting his family and pretty well off family, beautiful home on the water. And the father walks me around his property before dinner and asks me a very innocent question, which is the worst question you could ask me. He says, Jim, how's school? And I start, and you mentioned how introverted I am. I start bawling,
Mm.
crying in front of this complete stranger uncontrollably because I had so much pent up emotion that and I just tell him my whole story, broken brain, ready to quit school, it's not for me, don't have the money, I don't know how to tell my parents, I'm gonna be a total disappointment to them. And he's like, Jim, he asked me a new question. He's like, well, why are you in school? And besides perspective, changing the place and people you're with, maybe we need to ask ourselves new questions. Because I didn't know why I was in school. I just thought that's something you do, right? You go to school, get a career, and do that thing. But I was like, I didn't have an answer because no one's ever asked me that question. And you ask a new question, you get a new answer. Like a question like, what's the best use of this moment? Or what if it would have succeeded and I didn't do it, right? Like it's just a different
Mm.
thing. And then he says like, well, Jim, he saw I was struggling with answering it. He's like, well, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? What do you want to share, contribute? I didn't have any answer. And he really was patient with me, and I start to answer, and he takes out a piece of paper and says, stop. Just, and he asked me to write it down, right? Like a bucket list, like all the things I want to do before I kick the bucket.
Okay.
And I don't know how long the exercise was, but when I'm done, I start folding the sheets of paper to put in my pocket, my list of dreams. And he reaches out and grabs the pages right out of my hand. And Rory, I'm freaking out because I'm like the most insecure 18-year-old kid. And obviously, this person's very successful, and he's reading my intimate goals and, like dreams, right?
Yeah.
Things I've never shared with anybody or even realized until I wrote them down myself. And when he's done, and we're all scared of being judged, right? Like that's why I was shrinking down all the time because I didn't want to be judged, right? Other people's opinions, their expectations.
Totally.
And I realized that if we fuel your life with other people's opinions, then we're going to run out of gas, right? It's just not very sustainable. And I would remind everybody, don't take criticism because that's what keeps us from acting is like what people are going to think, and you don't want to be criticized. I live by this thing. I have this on my wall. Don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from.
Mm.
Don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from. And so he's reading it. I don't know how much time goes by. He's like, Jim, you're this close to everything on this list. And I'm spreading my index fingers like a foot apart. And I'm thinking, no way, give me 10 years. I'm not going to crack that list. And very wise man who was a mentor to me, he takes his index fingers, Rory, and he puts them to the side of my head,
Mm.
meaning what's in between was like the key that's going to get me everything on that list. And he takes me into a room of his home I've never seen before. You would love it. It is wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books.
Awesome.
And I remember having my reading difficulties. I've never read a book cover to cover. And it's like being in a room full of snakes for me, right? I'm so intimidated. But what makes it worse, Roy, is he starts going to shelves and grabbing snakes and handing them to me. And I'm freaking out, right? Because I'm thinking, like, what does he want me to do with this? And I started looking at titles of these books, and there are these biographies of some incredible women and men in history and some very early personal growth books like Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie, right? All the classics. And he says, Jim, you have to read to succeed. I want you to read one book a week. And I automatically go and I say, are you kidding me? Like, did you hear anything I was saying? I have a brain injury. I'm a poor reader and I'm not that smart. I have all this schoolwork. And when I said schoolwork, he was like, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education.
Mm.
Right. That's like a Mark Twain quote. And I was like, that's very insightful. And yet I can't commit to doing that because if I say I'm going to do it, I have to do it and I can't. People do this to me all the time at events. They know I'm a memory guy. They're like, Jim, I'm so glad you're here. I have a horrible memory. I'm just getting too old. And I always say, stop. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. If you
Mm.
fight for your limits, they're yours, right? But I'm fighting for my limits and I mentioned the schoolwork, and he's like, don't let school get in my education. I'm like, yeah, but I still can't do it, right? And then very smart man, he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out my dream list, which he still has. And he has the audacity, Rory, to read every single one of my dreams out loud.
Oh my gosh.
And imagine that, right? Like this insecure self-doubt, and you hear like someone who's obviously doing well, complete stranger, you hear your dreams in somebody else's voice and cant it out into the atmosphere, right?
Yeah, surreal.
And it messes with my mind and my spirit, something fierce. Because a lot of the things on that list were things I wanted to do for my family, for my parents, things they can never afford to do, or even if they had the money, they won't do it for themselves, right? And with that motivation, having going back to purpose, if you have a reason, you'll get the results because reasons reap rewards, right? And a lot of people, they're not, if they're holding back with their brand or their book or something that they know they want to get out there, like I did for so long. I didn't have a, I knew intellectually the reason, but I wasn't allowing myself to feel that reason. And with that leverage, I agree because I want to help my family to read one book a week. So fast forward, I'm back at school and I have a pile of books sitting on my desk that I have to read for midterms. I have a pile of books that I want to read, that I promised to read. And I already couldn't get through pile A. So what do? I don't have the time, so I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't work out, I don't spend time with, people and anything. I just live in the library for weeks and weeks and weeks. And one night at 2 o'clock in the morning in the library, I pass out of sheer exhaustion. I fall down a flight of stairs, hit my head again,
Oh my
and I
gosh.
woke up in the hospital 2 days later. And at this point, because I wasn't eating, I was very malnourished, hooked up to all these IVs. I was down to 117 pounds,
Wow.
right? So I lost all this weight. I thought I died, and it was the darkest time in my life. And when I woke up, I thought there has to be a better way, right? And when I had that thought, and God speaks this in different ways. Like the nurse came in and brought a mug of tea, and on it was a picture of Albert Einstein, the person I did that book report
Huh.
about. And it was interesting that learning that he had learning disabilities and he processed things differently and all this. But on the mug was a quote that said, "The same level of thinking that has created your problem won't solve your problem." And it made me ask new questions like, what's my problem? Well, I have a broken brain. I'm a very slow learner. Well, how do I think differently about it? Like Einstein. I was like, well, maybe I could fix my brain. Maybe I could learn how to learn faster. And I was like, okay, where do I do that? Well, school. And I asked the nurse for a course bulletin for with all classes for next semester. And I start going through it, a couple hundred pages, and they're all classes again of what to learn, but not how to learn. So I set my schoolwork aside and I start studying these books and then other things in the area of neuroscience, adult learning theory, multiple intelligence theory. I was obsessed. Like, how does my mind work so I can work my mind? I wanted to know what did ancient cultures do to remember things before there were printing presses and, you know, computers, right? And I started studying that, and then light switch went on, and I just started to understand, about 60 days into it, and my grades shot up, and so did my confidence in my life. But to bring it back to my career, how I ended up teaching it was I I was upset that I struggled every single day for 13 plus years when there were solutions out there. And, I felt a moral obligation to help people around me that were struggling the same
Mm.
way. And that moral impetus, I started to tutor and I wanted like friends just for free. And then I was like, well, how do I get more people? I was like, and I had that thought there was a classroom that wasn't being used on a Thursday night at 7 o'clock. I was walking past. I said, okay, next week, same on Thursday at 7 o'clock, I'm going to just put 5 or 10 people in there, teach them for free for a couple hours. And then maybe afterwards, one or two of them wants to be tutored and I can help them. And I go back. This is my first marketing. All right. So
Free
this
public
is how
seminar.
basic.
Here it comes.
This is amazing. I take a piece of paper and a black marker and I write free speed reading memory tips, get better grades, less time, Thursday, 7 o'clock with the classroom,
Good
right?
hook. Good hook.
Yeah. And then, and this is how, and I'm telling you, we don't have to, we could begin before we're ready, right? I didn't know what I was doing, but I just kind of trusted, I prayed and I prepared. But, and the next morning I make a few photocopies on the way to class. I put them on bulletin boards, not a lot. Fast forward to Thursday, the next Thursday, I'm walking at 7 o'clock and I just pray there are 5 people that show up, right? I turn the corner and outside of the room, there's a crowd of people. And my honest thought, Rory, was, wow, I hope whatever's going on ends soon so I could do my thing, right? Because you can't see what you don't believe, right? And it's not that you'll believe it when you see it, it's you'll see it when you believe it. But I didn't believe it. And I can't even get in because there's people standing in the doorway. I'm like, what's going on inside? And this guy looks at me, he's like, there's a speed reading class. And I thought, honest to God, I said, no way. What are the chances there's another speed reading class, the same room, the same night, same time? And I pushed my way in and packed, right? All the seats are taken, people standing in the back, and lo and behold, no one's teaching, right? And it takes my slow brain all that time to realize why they're all there and who they're all there for. And remember, I'm 18 years old. I look like I'm like 13 years old. I'm wearing t-shirts, shorts, and I have nothing really prepared to teach, right? I was, and I'm phobic of public speaking. I've never done it
Right.
before, right? Because even that book report, when when that the teacher asked me to hand it in, I was so nervous, Rory, in high school, like to be able to pass. I looked at her and I lied. I said I didn't do it.
Oh,
And
man.
you could see the disappointment in her face and in the, I was being teased more. But when the class ended, I remember leaving the class, I reach into my book bag and I take out that professionally bound book report and I threw it in the trash. And I think it symbolically it was like giving up hope, you know what I mean, or my dreams or my potential. But that's why Einstein coming back to me and giving me that kind of those words of wisdom. But going back, I still haven't done any public speaking, so I'm freaking out. My heart's beating out of my chest. I even talking about it, my mouth is going dry. So I leave, right? And because I can't even
With all
talk.
those
There's like,
people there, you just left?
yeah, because there's not 5 or 10 people. I do a head count, and there's 110 people,
Oh,
right?
man.
So I leave,
I told you it
and
was a
I
good hook. It was a good
yeah.
marketing hook.
And I go to this fountain because I can't even go back to my dorm room because my friend, my suite mates all make fun of me because they all knew about it. And so I'm just meditating by the fountain. Water's kind of calming me down. And I hear this voice inside my head, and it's my mom's. And I won't tell you exactly what she said, but essentially it's like all these people, you promised to help these people, 100 people, and you're disappointing them. You're disappointing me kind of message. And I'm doing this walking meditation back to my dorm room. And here's the lesson. I stop and I take one step back to the classroom. And the lesson for me is one step in another direction completely changes your destination. If you're going this way and take a step this way, you're going to end up somewhere different. And there's a quote in Limitless from a French philosopher that says, life is the letter C between the letters B and D, where B stands for birth and D stands for death, life C, choice. We always have these choices, right? Our lives are the sum total of all the choices we've made up to this point. I believe these difficult times, they could distract you. These difficult times, they could diminish you, or these difficult times, they could develop you. You decide. And I made this choice to go back to the classroom. And I go there, I apologize, but I don't remember what I talked about for 2 hours. But you ever like the stream of consciousness just kind of flows through you? And when I'm done, Rory, I came out of this trance. I was like, I don't know how to help all of you, but if you're interested, I need about 10 hours to teach you what's working for me, maybe 2 hours a week over the next 5 weeks. I get $30 an hour. This is what I got teaching tennis back in high school. I'm just making this up there. And I say, I'll be in the student center tomorrow at noon. If you're interested, I'll answer your questions. And I swear, Rory, 100 people stand up and they leave. Not one person talks to me.
Huh.
So I'm sitting 10 o'clock at night in an empty classroom and I'm totally confused and I'm so exhausted because when you do something you never thought you could do, I end up passing out on the carpet and it was the best sleep of my life. I get woken up the next morning, the class coming in at 8 o'clock in the next morning, and I'm embarrassed. I run back to my dorm room, shower, go to breakfast, go to class. 12 o'clock, I promised to go to the student center to answer questions. And I'm going to the student center, running a little bit late. And I just hope one person believed in me, just one, right? And when I get there, Rory, that same crowd of kids were there. And at the end of 90 minutes or 2 hours, 71 of those students signed up for a program that didn't
What?
even exist and at $300 a person because I didn't do the math. 10 hours times $30 an hour, and I didn't realize that students could go. They have a plastic card that goes into an ATM machine that takes out $300, right? Because I didn't have that, and so I'm not even 19 years old, and I have $21,000 cash in my pockets and my book
What?
bag, and and I don't even know. Like it's so surreal because that's a lot of money, but that was definitely a lot of money 30
Back then, yeah, that's
years
a
ago.
lot of dough.
Yeah. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what do I do with this? And I hear my mentors phrase, don't let school get in the way of education. I use practically all of it to travel the country and buy every program, go to every seminar, get mentored and coached by some of the best people in the space. And I really feed my mind. And one of those 71 kids was this young lady who read 30 books in 30 days and saved her mom's life.
Wow.
And that's why I continued on the journey, but I just want to reiterate that It was perspective. If I feel stuck, changing the people or place to get a new point of view, asking new questions of yourself, because you ask new questions, you'll get new answers. And stepping in a direction, making a choice, right? Because one step in another direction completely could change your destination. And if you're listening to this, I feel like there's a reason why, to listeners, that maybe they could relate to some aspect of my story, that they feel like they're here for a reason, and they went through adversity and they learned something from it. We hear a lot about post-traumatic stress. We do not hear a lot about the other side, post-traumatic growth. People have gone through such difficult times that you wouldn't wish upon anybody, but you discovered something. You discovered something about yourself, or you got clarity, or you found a mission, you found a trait or a strength, right? And and you wouldn't change what happened, right? And I feel like now's the time that we have to. So many people, like, we dim our lights, like I was shrinking all the time because we didn't want that light to shine in somebody else's eyes. And I feel like we live in a sometimes in a dark world, and we need as many people to shine as possible, and do the things. I feel like life is difficult for one of two reasons. Either you're leaving your comfort zone, life gets difficult, right? You're in the unknown, or life is difficult because you're staying in your comfort zone. And I feel like that for a long time I stayed in my comfort zone, because I just wanted to have my small little learning center and teach, the 100 people a month that I was teaching or whatever. But I also feel like that moral obligation, that, we're here for a reason. And I feel like at the end of our life, I feel like that it's like I visualize myself meeting the person that I could have been, and I just don't want to be disappointed. And my message for everybody here is that there is, and I promise you, I coach half of the Fortune 500 companies in the world. We have students online in every country in the world. I have a lot of feedback from people, and I could tell you without a doubt that there is a version of yourself, or your brand, or your book, or your bank account, or your brain. There's a version of yourself that's patiently waiting. And the goal is we show up every single day until we're introduced, right? And I just feel like we're all on this quest to reveal and realize our fullest potential. And when would now be a great time to make that choice? And it doesn't have to be a big one. It could be like a little thing you could do to kind of keep your momentum. For me, it was about getting my brain and my mind right, because I knew everything that was going to come from that. But things have to go from your head to your heart, then to your hands, right? It's your mindset, it's your motivation, it's also the methods. So that's what Limitless
Man,
is for me.
I
Limitless
love
is not
that.
about being perfect. It's not about, it's about progress. It's about advancing and progressing beyond what you're currently demonstrating or you believe is possible. And I just know that this is available to all of us, that I'm not definitely not special in this case. Um, and so I look forward to people like staying in touch with both of us, because I'm hoping that I get to read their books or see them on stage or watch their videos, or however they're getting their message out to the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so powerful. That's where I get my kicks. I get my kicks these days from watching clients succeed and when they win. And it's just awesome to be a part of it. What an inspiring message, buddy. So y'all get Limitless, follow Jim, say hello, learn from his stuff. I'm telling you guys, this is a guy has a heart of gold, and it's and brilliant insights that'll change your life. Jim, you went way over time, buddy. You
Yeah.
gave us so much extra time. I know you have to go.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please just
Corey,
know
I
that
want to thank you and your team again. We because we collaborated and we learned from you. We helped so many more people, and looking forward. We have a few. We have another book coming, so
come
we'll,
on
we'll
now.
definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll talk about that. But thank you for what you do. You're an inspiring force of nature. An unstoppable force for good and for God. So thank you.
Thank you, brother. Well, we'll link up to everything, y'all. And Jim, we're praying for you. We'll talk soon, buddy. All the best.